Then on Sports Central, we go over our next schedule preview of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Arkansas Razorbacks. Definitely one of the bigger surprise teams of the 2021 season, as this team went from being one of the worst teams in the SEC back in 2020 to 9-4 and a contender in the conference last season. But how will this team be in 2022 is what we'll be going over here today. We'll be going over the players this team will be losing, who they'll be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with some notable games from last season. And once again, this team was 9-4, which, considering how well this team has been, they've been a pretty terrible football team over the past decade, most years. And so a 9-4 record is definitely a step up from the past few years, and it's definitely something to build on heading into the future, because this team, they've got some young talent that definitely shows some major potential going into 2022 here. But some notable games here. This team beat Texas 40-21. That was kind of the game that, you could tell this team was a talented football team. They dominated Texas, who was the number 15 team in the nation at the time. They beat Texas A&M, number 7 team in the nation, which they're a quality football team. This team beat them by 10. They lost Ole Miss by 1, and they also lost to Georgia in there too, in a shutout. So Arkansas, this team was ranked in the top 10, which was insane. But turns out this team ended up losing a couple of tough games. That Ole Miss one in particular, losing by 1, just a brutal one there. But they did beat Mississippi State, number 17 team in the nation, 31-28. Lost Alabama by a touchdown. This team went neck and neck with Alabama, number 2 team in the nation. So that's something to keep in mind. This Arkansas team made some major strides in 2021, and they also beat Penn State in their bowl game 24-10. So, overall a great season for the Razorbacks, 4-2 in their first 6 games, and 5-2 in their last 7. Looking at your roster going into next season, KJ Jefferson, your starting quarterback, is returning. He had an excellent season in 2021. This is a quarterback that is a major dual threat quarterback. He can run the ball excellent. He put up 660 yards alone of rushing with 6 touchdowns last year. And if you look at his passing stats, his passing stats are actually excellent, considering, most dual threat quarterbacks are just good at running and they're decent at passing. But KJ Jefferson is an excellent passer as well. 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, 4 picks, and a 67% completion rate. So he is an excellent quarterback that really needs to, people need to keep an eye on him going into next season, because he is a dangerous quarterback, that is for sure. Traylon Smith, your top running back, is in the transfer portal. Last season he put up 619 yards, 5 touchdowns, so that'll be a tough loss. But KJ Jefferson was your top rusher anyway last season, as he put up over 650. And then you do have Raheem Sanders and Dominique Johnson both coming back, your second and third running backs last year. This team ran the ball a lot. They actually had, rushing-wise, over 2,200 combined rushing yards last season. So, this was a pretty dominant rushing team. But, Sanders and Johnson both combined for over 1,300 yards on the season of offense, and then 14 touchdowns. So, not too concerning in the backfield for sure. Receiving core-wise, this team does lose a couple. Treylon Burks, that's going to be a tough one. He put up over 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns. That's the most significant loss in this team for sure, if you ask me. The second receiver on this team was Warren Thompson, and he put up 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, Treylon Burks, he had a major impact on this team last season. He was the top receiver on this team by 900 yards. So that's a significant loss there for this team. You do have some good depth in there. You got Warren Thompson, but then you lose Tyson Morris, your third receiver last season. So there are a couple of significant losses in the receiving core for sure. That's one of the main question marks that I see with this team. So that's something to keep in mind. But, otherwise, the backfield looks excellent. Your quarterback situation with KJ Jefferson is excellent. So it's just a matter of if the receiving core can gain a couple of players, or, this is a team that's got some good depth there. So I'm not too concerned. But defensive line, you lose 2 on there. You lose 3 defensive linemen, 1 linebacker, and then 1 in the secondary. So defensively, really, you're looking just fine. You're losing 5 starters. Which isn't too terribly concerning. That's right around average. But they do have a brutal schedule. That is the one thing about Arkansas that does concern me a bit, is that this schedule, and we'll get into it in a couple of minutes here, but it is a tough schedule. And that's, that could be a good thing, definitely, because, for Arkansas, you get 11 wins in the regular season, which is, it sounds very steep, but this is a football team that shows huge potential, if you ask me. This team could make a run at the college football playoff, even if you take a loss on your schedule, because of how difficult it is. And plus, it's the SEC, the best conference in college football. So, but chances that an even better season in 2022, I mean, the chances are high, but once again, that schedule is going to be tough for you guys going into next season. Transfer portal and recruiting going into next season. You got Jaden Hazelwood coming in from Oklahoma, so you do add one there in the transfer portal at the receiving position, which is going to be huge. Obviously, once again, the main question mark that I see on this team is the receiving position. You got Cade Foran, who's coming in from South Florida, quarterback, although I don't see him having a chance of beating out KJ Jefferson. You got edge rusher Landon Jackson, who is coming in from LSU. You do lose a defensive back, Devin Bush. You also bring in Drew Sanders, a linebacker from Alabama. You lose another defensive back in Greg Brooks. So you do lose a couple of defensive backs to the transfer portal here, but you do bring in Brittany from Georgia, a safety, which is going to be a huge addition. That's going to be massive. And then you got McLuthern, a defensive back who is coming in from LSU. So the transfer portal overall has been, I would say, pretty good for Arkansas. I mean, Hazelwood, that's going to be a good addition to this receiving core in particular. Recruiting-wise, this team looks okay. I mean, 20th overall in the nation. That's a decent ranking, 28. But if you look at it in comparison to the SEC, it's pretty terrible. 13th in the SEC. So that's unfortunate, obviously, for Arkansas to be at the bottom of the SEC in recruiting. But on the flip side, I mean, if you look at them in comparison to most of the nation, I mean, 20th is not that bad, but they got 5 4-star recruits coming in and then 14 3-stars. But that said, let's look at your schedule now going into next season. And once again, as I said, this is a brutal schedule. I mean, your non-conference games, you got Cincinnati, who is just in the college football playoff next year. Don't expect the Bearcats to be quite as good next season, but they're still going to be a good team. And then you got Missouri State. That'll be easy. And then if you look down the stretch, you got BYU on the road. BYU is a good football team. That's going to be a team that's, I would assume, will be ranked in the top 20 for a good chunk of next season. I mean, that's a good football team. And then you got Liberty, who obviously is no gimme. So, I mean, it's a pretty tough schedule for Arkansas here. Plus, you got to play Texas A&M. You got to play Alabama because you're in that division. And then if you look at the flip side, I mean, you got to play some tough teams in the SEC. I mean, South Carolina could be decent. I mean, Mississippi State is usually pretty good. Auburn, they've got a couple of question marks, but they look okay. LSU, Ole Miss. So it's going to be a brutal schedule. One of the toughest schedules that I've seen in particular in college football. But that said, let's look at our first 6 games here. Cincinnati, South Carolina, both. I'm going to favor the Razorbacks, but both are definitely not easy games. I mean, you're going to be at home your entire September, so you don't have a road game in your first month. But Cincinnati, they lose a lot of talent after last season. I mean, that's a team that's going to go back into a little bit of a rebuilding phase, I think, in 2022. I mean, they'll still be a good team, potentially get 8 wins at least. But obviously, they were stacked with talent last year. That's why they're in the college football playoffs. So they're gonna fall off just a little bit, but they'll still be good. South Carolina, Spencer Rattler, that's an unpredictable team. I do think that they'll get 6 to 8 wins next year, but I'm going to favor Razorbacks right now because Arkansas is at home, plus I'm more confident in Arkansas right now. Missouri State, easy win. Texas A&M that's going to be in a neutral location there. That's going to be a tough one. Texas A&M is going to be good next year, so I'm going to favor the Aggies in that game. I mean, Arkansas beat them last season, but I don't know if it'll be the same story this upcoming season. I mean, they look really good, I would say. Alabama's also going to be a tough team. That's going to be a home game. Well, actually, I will take that back, okay? I said before that this team doesn't go on the road in their entire September. They do. Technically, it's not really an away game, but it is in AT&T Stadium there in Jerry's World for that Texas A&M game. So they do kind of go on the road there. But Alabama on the 1st of October, that's going to be a home game. And I think potentially that could be a game where Arkansas's got a chance. But I'm going to favor the Crimson Tide right now. Mississippi State on the road, I'm going to favor Arkansas in that game as well, even though it could definitely be a close one, but I do think Arkansas is the better team out of those two. Looking at the second half, BYU, that is a scary game on the road in a tough place to play, especially, I mean, if it's a night game, I mean, Provo is a dangerous place to play, especially when their team is good. So that BYU game, keep an eye on it because that's not a gimme by any means. But I'm going to favor Arkansas on there. I'm also going to favor Arkansas in that Auburn game on the road. Auburn's a tough team to predict too. And then you got Liberty, who's going to be at home. I'm going to say an easy win for now, but Liberty's kind of a wild card. Some years they're good and other ones they're not so much. And then you got LSU at home on the 12th. I'm going to favor Arkansas in that game as well, even though LSU, obviously, they've got a couple of transfers coming in that could change up that team, but I'm going to still favor the Razorbacks. Ole Miss at home. They're going to be, I don't know about Ole Miss next year, losing Matt Corral, and they're losing quite a bit of talent as well on that team. So I don't see Ole Miss. I mean, they'll potentially be 8 to 10 wins, but I don't know if that team will be in a New Year's Six bowl by any means. And then Missouri on the road as well. I'll favor the Razorbacks there as well. So record projection is 7-5 to 10-2 for this team. I considered making the ceiling as 11-1, but I feel like that's a bit steep considering how difficult this schedule is. I mean, Texas A&M, Alabama, you'll lose one of those games, I think, for sure. I mean, and if you don't, that is a really good sign. If you're 5-0 heading into October, or if you're 5-0 heading into that Mississippi State game, that would be insane. But yeah, 7-5 to 10-2 is my prediction for this team. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this Razorback football team, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.